Gaston Dwayne Tarbet was born in Shamrock, Texas in 1939 to Valta and Eunice Tarbet. He graduated in the top 10% of his 1954 class. LCU's Dean of Admissions, E.R. Higgins, drove out to the family farm in his personal car and pulled Gaston off of a tractor to recruit him for university studies. Gaston moved to Lubbock, enrolled in biblical studies, and graduated in the first class of LCU in 1959. While attending LCU, Gaston was active in basketball, Kiadai, the Aggie Club, and served as president of the chorus 2 years and co-president of the Student Association. Gaston moved to Abilene for further studies and met Janet Mae Gibson, a high school valedictorian and cheerleader from Mount Judea, Arkansas. They first met at ACU in September of 1961 and courted for 2 years, often using Wednesday night mission study as a date night. They married on August 2, 1963. Gaston and Janet's future took a turn toward missions when Livonia Church of Christ approached them in 1965 to become their missionaries. Livonia sent the Tarbets to Nigeria in 1966 to replace an ailing David Underwood as principal of a Bible school in Onitsha, eastern Nigeria. However, civil war broke out in Nigeria just 10 months into their work, forcing the Tarbets to move next door to the Cameroons, where they worked among newly planted churches throughout 1969. The Tarbets then moved to western Kenya to focus on church planting and leadership training among the Luhya people. Gaston and Janet served in Kenya from 1969 to 1976, and for a single year also in 79 to 80 and 88 to 89. Upon returning to America, the Tarbets settled in Abilene, where Gaston taught Bible at Abilene Christian University. Gaston and Janet returned to the mission field in Uganda several years in the 90s, planting an urban church in the capital city of Kampala. A special treat of this urban ministry was serving alongside their son-in-laws and daughters, Greg and Deborah Carr and Dave and Janet Jenkins. Gaston and Jan returned again to America and eventually settled in Roscoe, Texas, their current home, where Gaston led a prison ministry for several years before retiring. Gaston remains an active alumnus of LCU.
God was very faithful to help us to learn. We went as teachers, but we turned out to be learners. And I think one of the things is just the fact that I can learn from other people who have not been as fortunate in terms of getting education as I had. And so that was a wonderful, eye-opening experience for me.
Almost any missionary will tell you that they learn more from the people they go to. So at times I think we learned more from the people we went to. Just their love, their sensitivity spiritually, and their hunger for spiritual things. And interestingly enough, we worked with older people. There were a lot of older people that weren't formed in churches, and they read their Bible, and they loved the Lord. And so I'm really have good memories of what I learned from them.
I could see that my concept of God changed. I had a concept of him that he was a father and he cared for us, but it was more but while I was overseas, I sensed that he was more than a general care. It was specific things that God cared for. We had to evacuate out of Nigeria, and we had a 2-hour notice, and we could take only 2 suitcases, and there were 3 of us. And so we left, but we left without fear. And that was an act of God. That's what I learned, that trust God and he'll take care of us. That's what I learned, one of the things I learned. And he did, as we were being evacuated out of Nigeria to go to Cameroons.
I think the pat answers and maybe the religious answers that I had, to some degree, had formed a value system for me, dropped away, and I felt called to a deeper compassion for people.
So it was a challenge for me to get back and let God be in charge, and then when nationals begin to follow Jesus, let them be in charge, and I don't have to be out in front pushing. So that was a real challenge for me, to crucify my desires in that area daily. Pride has always been an effort. Approval of others has always been a struggle. And so God dealt with me in many different ways to try to limit that. And so that was a challenge for me, to follow his leadership and not my desires. I began to understand also that God can use men who are not just strong, but God can use, well, strong men in their weaknesses. I considered myself an outgoing person, a strong man, but I had some weaknesses, and they caused problems, and that hurt. But out of that, I learned that God can forgive. He's a God of grace. He's a God of second chance. He's in reconciliation at whatever level, and I experienced that, and I'm able to pass that on to other people. That God is a God of grace, and He wants all people to know that He loves them, and He wants to transform their lives as He's transforming my life. Working on the mission field, you don't work alone. We've mentioned already about the Livonia Church. They made a real commitment to parent us, to take care of all of our needs with God's resources. And every Friday morning, the men, before they went to work, would go by the church building and spend time praying for the Gaston, Janet Tarbet family. And that meant so much to us, to know that people would give an hour on a Friday morning to pray for us. That unlocked so many doors and kept the enemy away so much. We will never know the impact of that until we get to eternity.
If we hadn't had a church like we did, we would not have survived it. But we did. We did survive it, and we sensed God just lifting us up over every bump and every bruise. And
let me say that one of the things that she did as a wife to me and to mother of our children was she was a fantastic wife, in that she was praying for me, she would encourage me, she would always be there for me, so that as a unit we could share Jesus, we could plant churches and help train church leaders. While she was not publicly out doing it, she was my number one supporter.
to know that this world is not their home, and to not let it form and mold them into being deceived and thinking that it is.
My advice to students at Lubbock Christian would be to be open to God's working in your life through your teachers and through fellow students. 55 years ago when I came, I was influenced by the leadership of this campus. Dr. F.W. Maddox, Gerald Kendrick, Hugh Rhodes, Dr. Bates, Wayne Hines, and others. They just had an impact over me. Be open for other people's, allow them to change you. Let God use them to change you. And then respond with an open heart.